Hello, my love.
We made
We
it.
did. We're here. We're live. So, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We have got the fabulous Susie Powis, who is a return to work and career transition coach and founder of Hi.Ho Coaching. She spent 20 years in commercial leadership, so she knows exactly how tough it can be to juggle work, family, and your own ambitions. And she started Hi.Ho Coaching to help give people the kind of practical skills and supportive advice she really needed when she was working, and to help them navigate their career changes with confidence and clarity. So today, Susie is here to help us figure out how to negotiate what we need when it comes to work and family life. And that goes from asking for the flexibility you need to making sure you don't drop too much in your salary when you go part-time, and what to do if they say no. So welcome, Susie. First of all, before we kick off with all the juicy stuff, can you tell us how you became a negotiation expert?
Well, I mean, I love the term expert. So as you say, unfortunately, it has been 20 years in my corporate career. And I started as a buyer and then a commercial manager, always working in retail. So working for some of the biggest retailers on the high street, like Amazon, Sainsbury's, and John Lewis. And so I would either negotiate with the suppliers or support the buying teams to negotiate for what they needed with their suppliers. So I have negotiated against pretty much every brand you can name on the high street. And in my latest corporate role, it was for a fintech startup for consumer electronics. So there I negotiated everything from the products with Apple all the way to the rent of our building, how much we were paying for our direct debits. You name it, I negotiated it. So I have been highly trained in negotiation, and I have trained a lot of other people, buying teams, individuals, to do the same. And now with Hi.Ho, I support women all the way through their kind of work life cycle, whether that's figuring out how to return to paid work or thinking, God, this job just isn't for me anymore, like negotiating how we sort of pivot, and also how to really succeed in the roles we have to push for more, like a better pay, better work-life balance, etc. So negotiation is a huge part of every single one of those parts of your work-life balance. And I know we picked up this conversation because I said, flexible working is awesome and everyone needs it, but there aren't enough jobs out there at the moment. And so I proposed to you that, why don't we try to teach some people how to negotiate for what they want where they are, so that everyone can start getting what they really need, rather than waiting for that kind of what feels at the moment can sometimes be an elusive, flexible job.
It's so true, Susie, because the work that we're doing, we see it all the time. We see all of these potentially great jobs, but then they have hybrid requirements that don't really fit around family, or they don't have a great salary because they're part-time. So it's like, okay, these perfect roles for mums, for women, for parents going back to work don't really exist. So how do we get what we want, even if the job description doesn't say it? Or maybe we're going back into a role where we were on maternity leave, but now we need to work in a different way. How do we negotiate that? So hopefully you can help us, because I'm really bad at that. I will give you some examples as we go through about how bad I am. But it would be great to hear from you. What is your sort of number one strategy when it comes to negotiation across the board, whether that's with your boss or maybe even your kids and your husband? I don't know. But do you have a strategy that you use in sort of almost every situation where you need to negotiate? Is there a process that you follow?
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully my husband isn't watching, because, I don't want two people being too trained in this stuff in this house. Yeah, absolutely. For all negotiation, there is a real process to follow. And actually, once you know and understand that process, what some people find quite scary about negotiation is the sort of emotional aspect to it all. And I think once you know the process and understand it, then you can actually remove some of that emotion and just focus on the facts and the data, which is really what negotiation is all about. Now, there is everything from negotiating the price of a handbag when you're on holiday at a market, to negotiating for the job you've always wanted with the flexible working and the paycheck and everything else. And they are two very different forms of negotiation. Now, the one that we're here to talk about is actually really fueled by emotion, and there are a lot of different levers that play into it. You know, you might be focusing on a bit about pay, a bit about flexible working, a bit about what your job role is, a bit about hours, but there are so many aspects to like to your work contract, and you should look at negotiating all aspects of that. But it means that there's several levers. So when we look at any negotiation, and feel free to use this when buying a house or anything, you want to think about three things, and that is you. So what do you want? What is your ask? And then what levers can you hang your hat on, I guess? So what things make you really favourable in this situation? So that might be that you've landed this really great project, that you have saved the company £500 million, that you know, they're all the sort of extra brilliant things that we should always be saving into a special folder of wins, either for that kind of when the negotiation arises, or actually when you've got your mid-year review. So we can say, actually, this little bit of feedback, that's really helpful. That's an extra lever to show that I'm really loved and respected in this office. Here's something that I delivered really, really well, on time, under budget, etc. Save that in my little bank. So that's your kind of, that's number one, and that's you. Number two is your opposition. So that's what we'll call today, whoever you are against. So it could be your manager, it could be an HR, it could be someone you've never met before, because if you're going for a new role, you might not know them that well yet. So what you want to do is think about what they need from you, or what they want generally. Now, you might not know that off the top of your head. However, that is one of the big keys in like a negotiation strategy. So I'll move on to that in a second. That third thing you need to think about is your backstop. And that is the point at which you will walk away from this negotiation. So if you are going into a pay rise negotiation saying, I want 10K more, and they say, and you have to understand, like, at what point you're going to walk away. Well, you might need at least 5K more, otherwise actually this job is no longer tenable for you. Or you might just be trying your luck saying, I'd really like 10K more, therefore your backstop is exactly where you are now, and that's fine. That is really personal. There is no judgment. It is what is right for you in that negotiation, but it's really important you know what it is, because otherwise you have the ability to be able to be negotiated below your backstop, and before you know it, you've agreed to everything, you're on 15K less, working 6 days a week, and whatever that may be. So as long as you know that backstop, when the negotiation gets to that point, say, do you know what, I'm out, we're no longer having this conversation, I will carry on as I am. Or if it is the case where you need to leave, then you will leave. Before we kind of go on to the prep, which is the major part of any negotiation, what I want everyone to know is there's two things that most people will say if they're not kind of well versed in negotiation. They will either say, well, if I don't get what I want, I will quit, I will leave XYZ. That's number one. And the other one is, well, what I'll do is I'll just ask for 15K more than what I want, and then they can negotiate me back. Now, those two things show to your position that you don't know what you're talking about, that you are trying your luck, and it really undermines your negotiation. So if you say you're going to quit and then you don't, so if your backstop is to quit, if you don't get any more money, that's your backstop, and that's fine. Lay that on the table if you need to. But if you don't then quit, you don't then walk away from the role, you will be seen as a flight risk, B, not great to work with. Like, basically your card will be marked forevermore
Yeah.
by senior leadership. It
I guess you've
doesn't.
lost your power, haven't you? You kind of like, they don't trust that what you say you're going to do, you're going to do. So then you kind of lose that power if you need it in the future for anything.
Absolutely, but you also look like a toddler who's spat the dummy, basically. And also, if you go into negotiation just putting loads of more money on top of your ask that you can't really justify where that's coming from, again, as soon as someone says, how are you justifying that 15 grand, we're using this example, and you, oh, I think it's what I deserve, there's no justification there. So those are two things I would say stay away from. So if we go back to the strategy of a negotiation, you've got the three things that you need to figure out beforehand. Now, you use your prep time to understand those things. You might not know them all at first, especially what your opposition wants from you. A negotiation should be over a really long period of time, and it starts with building that rapport and that relationship with your opposition, understanding what they want, what their desires, etc., how they work. So you'd ask a lot of open-ended questions to understand what's stressing them out at the moment, what have they got on their plate, what do they need help with? Because as soon as you can understand that, then you can start to stack their wants and desires against your levers. And then when you get into negotiation, you can start trading the two off against each other. So you can say, if you, whatever your desires may be, if you can accept 4 days a week, then I can take on that extra project for you, get that off your plate. So you
Okay.
stack what you want against what they want, and you trade them off against each other. So you should never be giving anything up for nothing. And that is another thing I find when mums are going for flexible working, they're so desperate for that job that they're like, oh, what, yeah, great, whatever you want. Don't be grateful for the, I mean, do be grateful for the job, but they need to be grateful they've got you. They've got a really highly skilled person for a lot less money.
Well,
They're
this is it.
winning.
And I think that's where we often feel this sticking point is that we are so grateful for any sort of flexibility or being able to, work the way that we need to work, that we will then give our all, and we'll make sure that we're, taking on that extra project or saying yes to everything when it comes down the line. So you kind of have to know what your boundaries are around that, I guess. But yeah, I definitely know that in the past, I've been very grateful just for that. I'm going to work extra hard for that extra grand that you've given me across the whole year. I probably deserved that anyway. I just was rubbish at negotiating in that first place.
Exactly that. So it's really key that when you go into negotiation, you think, okay, well, I can give you some of the things that I know I've got that I'm really great at. And I know that I can take off some of those things from your plate. Now, you might value some of your things very differently to their valuing their things. So sometimes it's a bit hard to match their desires with your levers. But value is only in the eye of the owner, essentially. So you can sell that in or sell in. Go on about this all day, and trust me, I've run training for like 2 days straight on this sort of thing. So I'll try and stop there and keep succinct. But if anyone has any more questions on that, I will happily answer them. So I guess once you've kind of been doing your prep and you understand what the levers are and what their desires are, then the next best thing is to think about, okay, what's the best timing to do this? Now, and I'm sort of viewing this negotiation as when you're already in the job and you're looking for a pay rise or a promotion, what is the best time to ask for that ask? And that would be after something great has happened, like a big project has just finished, or you've just got some really great feedback, or something really positive has happened. Because you can imagine if you're in a bad mood, you've had 2 hours sleep, and someone comes and asks for something that is already going to be a bit tricky to give you because you've got no budget, and people above are trying to understand where cost cutting is coming from. The instant answer is just no. There's not even a conversation. So timing actually is everything. And that's why I say negotiation should be quite a drawn out process. It should be quite long. There should be a bit of a warm up, building that rapport, kind of a bit of a foreplay before you get into it. You need to kind of get them into the position of understanding that you deserve it, that you're great, that you're wonderful, that they need you. And then you can go in with the ask. So that will be different for every negotiation. But as long as you're building that rapport first, then I think you'll be in a really great place once you come to actually land the ask.
On that point, if this wasn't, we were working for these people anyway, we were working for this company, but it was, we want to ask for that bit of flexibility when we're at a job interview, or, we're going for a new role, how would you use that sort of timing piece? At what point would you ask for the flexibility? Would you do it before you go in? And I'm assuming no, but how do you then build up that rapport that you need and to use these levers in a situation where you're needing to do it for a new job?
Yeah, so it's really important not to just start going, well, I need to work 3 days a week and Thursdays needs to be at home. And, if you lay down your demands early, it's a cold relationship. They've probably got 6 other applicants that are already more favourable just because you've shown a bit of attitude and maybe you're a bit of hard work. However, at the beginning, you also don't want to waste your time. If you can't go and work a 5-day-a-week job, then you need to be upfront and saying, is there flexibility in this role? Hopefully they'll say yes, and then you can proceed through the interview process, and then hopefully you can show them throughout that interview process that you are the best person for the job, you're highly skilled, they're exactly what they need. And usually at the end, when they're offering me a job, saying, great, I asked at the beginning, was flexibility a possibility for this role? What are the options here? Can we talk about that? And then you're opening into a conversation of, you've decided you need me, you've decided I'm the best out there, so now let's talk about what I need. And that is absolutely fine, and that's absolutely the way to go. And I have to say, the last 2 jobs I've got, I've absolutely used this technique. For my last, for fintech, I knew I didn't want to work 5 days a week, so I went for a job that maybe was slightly lower than pay wise than what I wanted. But you go through the process, you say, now you see what you're going to get. I'll take all of that money, but I'm only going to do 4 days a week.
Okay, and that's a
Because
great tip, isn't it? I think, yeah, you show that you can do the job in that time. I'm going to do this, but I'm going to keep, and then you're keeping that bit the other bit, which is the salary piece, which we'll come on to later, there as well. So that's a really great way to almost get the flexibility, but keeping that salary that you want.
yeah, and I think what you need to remember when you're given a job description, that is about tasks. And so it shouldn't be about the amount of days you're in the office. It's, can you complete these tasks within the day, month, year? Therefore, you should have that salary. That is how it should be judged. And if you can go in and do it on 3 days a week and someone else can do it on 5, you're paying for task completion in my mind, rather than, it is different obviously if you're in customer service, then of course you need to be on the phone 5 days a week. But for the most part, if you can show that you can complete those tasks within a short period of time, but to the same level as someone else working 5 days, there's no reason you shouldn't be on the same money. And you can ask that and state that in your interview process. And if they query it at all, say, well, let's give it a trial. Give me a month, 2 months to learn the ropes, and then I'll work on 3 days a week on the full pay. Let's review at the end of every month. Let's review at the end of 3 months. Let's see.
Exactly. And what they got to lose there, right? They're going to
Exactly.
test it out. It doesn't work. They're going to say to you, okay, we need to do 5 days, and then you work around that. And that's another conversation that you need to have. Okay.
Exactly.
Well, that is really helpful to know. I've never done that, but if I did have to, I'm going to use that.
Yeah, it is, and that's what's so frustrating with women looking to get back into the paid workforce. They're so grateful that they forget that they're an absolute catch.
Yeah.
And so they should be really advocating for themselves. And unfortunately, so often they're at a point of low confidence or just grateful to get a job. And, the job market is tough at the moment. So, I understand why people jump at the opportunity and then maybe, are just so grateful that they don't bother negotiating anything. But you have a leg to stand on. If they've offered you the job, they're not going to take it away just because you asked for flexibility.
That's the hope, I guess, isn't it? And that's where being confident in what you're bringing to the table and telling them, I can do these things in this time, and standing up for yourself is really important. Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got the prep time is really important. You've got the timings key. Is there anything else we need to be thinking about in terms of the next stage of the process?
Yeah, I think, definitely that trading piece. If you, then I. So if you can do this for me, then I can do that from you. That's really, really important in the conversation. And then just keep it really open. I would say, depending on what you're negotiating for, if you know exactly that you need a Thursday from home, then ask for it. However, if you are going into the conversation, I really need more time with my children, then let that be your ask, because then you can have some really creative thinking between the two of you of what, and find a middle ground that fits you both. So they might need you to, your position might need you to be visible on a Wednesday morning or a Monday afternoon or whatever, and you're like, okay, well, I can make that work around nursery or around what I need for my kids, and actually what I want is more time with my children. So you can really start to bring to the table some creative thinking, and the more open you can be about your ask, actually, the easier it is to come to a conclusion, because it's easier for both of you to get a little bit of what you're after. If you're quite rigid, and sometimes you have to be, but the more rigid you are, actually, the harder it is for someone to meet you where you are.
That makes a lot of sense. It sounds like everything, this is about a conversation. It's not, it's not power struggle. It's a open book conversation. The more you can make it feel like that for both sides, then it sounds like hopefully you'll get to where you need to go. You just need to be clear on what you need and be a bit flexible yourself, right?
It's all about compromise. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and lots of people envisage negotiation as two people shouting across the table at each other, but actually, you won't realize the amount of negotiations you do every day with your children. And I bet you're not screaming over a table at them every time. But that negotiation of trying to get their shoes on or distracting them after they've had a fall or they're a bit upset about something, that's all a negotiation. It's about your delivery and it's about that relationship and it's about building the trust and, all of those little things. They always say, Nick, that toddlers are the best negotiators because they've got nothing to lose. But you're used to negotiating against them. So, you're well practiced as well. Yeah, so that's really important to, yeah, absolutely. I think the just remembering it is just a data-led conversation probably
And
makes things a bit easier in terms of, taking how scary it is out of it.
And when you say data led, that is whether it's say if it's salary, for example, you would say,
Mm,
well, I know that this at market rate would be this much salary, so I know I can do that even if I'm doing it in less time. This is what I should be paid based on my experience. And is that what you mean in terms of come with as much
absolutely.
data as you can find?
That's all about your levers. So yes, there's that bit about how great you are and what skills you have, but also go and do the prep. Like look at your company's accounts. Like, have they got money? Because there's no point in asking, someone on the street for a bit of money. That's not going to happen. So understand, does your company have money? Can you even understand what the budget looks like in your department? Can you go on Glassdoor and have a look at a comparison of job titles for your, what that salary expectation would look like? There's plenty of forums online, Ask AI, gather research to make everything about your ask that little bit stronger. So you've got data to back that up. Absolutely. So you can go in and say, I believe I should be on 8K more. Here's why. Here are the comparison webs. Here are the comparison companies that are of a similar size to us. This is the job description. Actually, I've looked at some of the breakdown of the tasks in those job descriptions. Actually, I'm doing more than that already. And these are the 3 companies I found that are already offering 8 grand more for this role. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah. Okay. And another strategy I've heard in the past is, okay, you've been offered a job and you've been given this package, but
Mhm.
maybe you've been offered a job somewhere else, or you pretend that you've been offered a job somewhere else. There's kind of this, well, if this is what they're offering me, what can you do to match it? Would you say that's a good skill or strategy
Mm.
to go in with, or not?
I think it's tricky. I think if you're going to blag that and that will be a false claim, then you do run the risk of the people that you actually want to work with turning you down. So if they've offered you a job with 80% of your asks and you're trying to pretend that there's another role out there that's been offered to you with 100% of your asks, you do run the risk going, if they could turn around at that point and say, we can't offer you that, so best of luck in your other role. However, if you go to them and say, listen, I've benchmarked this role, this just job description against these other companies, what I'm really looking for here is 100% of my ask, then you're opening a conversation. Actually, what does that look like from you? Why can't you offer that to me? What is the conversation there? Can we work? Can we meet in the middle at all? This is what I'm asking. This is why I'm asking for it, not just because I've inflated my ego and think that I'm worth more. Actually, I've got data points to prove that I could go elsewhere, but I wouldn't lie about it,
Yeah.
because if you go to the table for a conversation, they're not going to take the job away from you for asking. But if you say, I've got something else on the back burner, they could say, see you later. So it's a much higher risk to pretend that something else is waiting in the wings for you.
Okay, that makes sense. That's good to know. So keep that aside. So,
Mm.
what if they were to say no? What would you do in that instance? If you took something to the table, you had the data, you were prepped, you were ready, you knew where your backstop was. If they then turned around and said no to you, what would you do in that situation?
So I think for the most part, and what we'll do actually is in the coaching channel, I'll post a picture. It's called the change curve. Like you guys can Google it, have a look at it. And basically, it's the emotion that someone goes through as they are more aware of your ask. And so that's why I say it's really important to warm people up to the negotiation, because they'll be further along the change curve. They know what's coming, they know what we're expecting, and actually they're more they're closer to the other end of the change curve, which says, I'll accept your offer. So if this is a relationship that you have in place already, my initial suggestion would be actually just to restate your ask. Say, I really need 8K more in this role because I benchmark it across these. I'm actually achieving more than these other job descriptions, therefore I feel like I deserve it. Because unless you're being given really great rationale back as to why they can't offer you what you have asked for, then you are reopening that conversation to ask for clarification. So it's really important that they give you an indication as to why they can't offer you what you've asked for. And they need to back that up with data as well. So if they haven't, I would restate the argument and see what comes back, because even just by restating, they will be further along the change curve. So they will be closer. Scientific fact, they'll be closer to saying yes. Now, if they've given you some reasons as to why they can't offer you flexible working, then they are points at which you need to go and do a bit more investigation. So go and understand whether what they're stating is true. See if there aren't ways around that argument. So they're saying, oh, no one else in the company is currently hybrid, therefore we can't offer it to you. Or, no one else in the company is on 10K more for this job description, so we can't offer it to you. But that gives you a leg to go and do a bit more research. So actually, it doesn't matter if no one else in your company is on the same pay scale as you. If other companies are willing to pay you that money for the job you're doing, that gives you some evidence. So you can use that and go back against what they're saying. So I think just always view anything they come back with as a reason to investigate more. Go away, do that investigation and come back very friendly, keeping that open relationship. Say, listen, I know we discussed this previously. These are the reasons that you stated you can offer me that. However, I've done a bit of research and this is what I found. I'm really keen to keep this conversation of giving me 8K more, let me do hybrid working on the table. And just open it back up again with just restating what you wanted before, doing a bit of kind of adjustment in terms of what they've stated they can't offer you or why they can't offer it to you. And therefore you're just strengthening your argument again.
It feels like negotiation is it sounds like such a long process, which is maybe why I've never got into that before, because I've sort of gone, oh, okay, thanks very much, and off I go, and I'll think I'll negotiate that, at a later point, or maybe, or I'll just work hard and then of course they're going to want to pay me more, those kind of things. So, but it sounds like you need to be really intentional about it. Keep that conversation open as much as you can, but have all that data to back you up at whatever point along the curve and the process that you're in. That's really helpful, Susie. Thank you. Now, before we get going, we did ask our audience what they needed most help with in terms of negotiation. And you're probably not surprised to know that most people, so 50% wanted remote working, and then 30% wanted salary help, and then the 20% was the hours, so negotiating maybe reduced hours or different days. Now, this is really interesting to me because actually my husband had a negotiation with a new job recently, and he went through sort of a week-long process. So I saw it was a long process, and I was sort of sitting there on the edge of my seat really painfully watching him. But at no point did he try and negotiate remote working or the hours that he was working. It was all based on his salary and his package, which, is for our family. But it was so interesting to see that. And he said, well, actually, I'll sort that stuff out when I get there, because for him, that wasn't the priority. The priority was, giving us what we needed as a family. So salary was key. And now, obviously he's in and he's, accepted the 3 days in the office that he needs to work and the hours that he's needing to work. So that's not on the table anymore to negotiate. So I just think it's really interesting that actually, particularly women, mothers, they need to negotiate that remote working, the hours often over the salary. How do you get round negotiate? We've touched on it before, but is there anything we can do particularly around that piece around the remote work or the hours so that we also then don't lose out on that salary as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of your conversation can be around task completion rather than visible time, etc., or time in the office. And that kind of is around working hours and hybrid working. Now, I think if you're already in the role, then it is a little easier to see where precedents might have been set elsewhere in the company and who might be allowed to do what and why, etc. So you can start to suss out what the business currently does elsewhere, because it doesn't matter what policy a business has, it always comes down to the manager. But if you can show that actually that manager over there and that manager over there allow their team to do exactly what I would want to do, that does strengthen your argument against your manager. So it's important to do that research. Again, just by opening up the conversation, you start to understand a bit more the rationale around why you haven't been allowed to do that in the past. So again, you can start to build an argument against that in terms of and I say an argument, I don't mean an argument like a row, but in terms of, building your data and being able to substantiate your claim against what they're saying. It is really interesting that women will always put that first rather than men. And I would say that when you go into a new job, you might have 5 different criteria that are important to you. Now, for your husband, maybe the bottom 2 weren't important, so he didn't bother talking about them. But actually, that is your moment to negotiate everything right up the front because then you can move the levers all a little bit, but the whole package is greater rather than just concentrating on 3 and then you've got to come back and do another 2. Like, if they're really not important and they're a nice to have, then great, but actually you don't know how easy that would have been when you're negotiating your salary. So it's really important to think about everything you want before you place your ask and then negotiate against them. Now, of course, I would probably prioritize what you want in an order and make sure that you're concentrating on the most important things. But by laying it all on the table, then you can negotiate the whole thing at once. And, some of the most complex negotiations we will have so many moving parts that you do almost build a spreadsheet to understand what each of those might mean, value wise. Is the total value when we move these tiny bits here, there and everywhere, does that actually equal a greater sum? Therefore, we're winning, essentially. Now, for personal negotiations, it's not as complex as that, but there are quite a few moving parts. So just always concentrate on the ones that are a priority to you, but I would restate everything that you're asking. If you've got 5 things that you're negotiating for, and you've been discussing one point that has moved slightly, maybe that is hybrid working, that's fine. When you've agreed that point, you say, thank you for agreeing to 4 days from home. Just to say, right, so it's 4 days at home. We'd also like to discuss my salary, my hours of work. Just restate them. Once one thing's been agreed, say, thank you very much. At the moment, we're looking at 4 days and this salary. I'd really like to discuss how we can, and you continue the conversation for the other points until you've kind of negotiated everything that you want. So just because you go with 5 things and they start talking about one doesn't mean the other 4 have been forgotten. You just need to restate it. And it's almost a new ask because one thing will have been confirmed. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And
Okay.
I was going to ask, can you go with almost too much of an ask? But it sounds like you almost treat them potentially one thing at a time, making sure that you are covering all the things that you need. And can there be, at any point that you would say, okay, I've negotiated my 4 days at home, and then you talk about the salary, and then it almost changes their answer to the others. Have you ever seen that happen where it sort of stops the other thing being possible?
No, because once you've confirmed something, most people, and both parties have agreed that's confirmed, then you can carry on the conversation.
Okay.
So that's almost put to bed. And if they try to reopen that, you're like, oh no, we've closed that. Let's move on.
Yeah.
We don't need to talk about that anymore. We've both confirmed that we're happy with that part of this negotiation. We'll carry on. I've never seen a point where they go, oh well, God, if you're going to ask for 5k more, then I'm taking back everything we've already discussed. That's not how it works, because they want you to be happy. They want you to be working in the best way you can, and I've never seen it.
Okay, well that's reassuring to know, and I feel like for myself and hopefully for our audience and the parents that are listening, that will make them feel better, that actually they don't just have to stop at getting the hours or the flexible working that they need. They can then also ask for the salary, and that's not something, you're not asking for too much, to make sure that you're getting paid what you deserve and the experience that you have going into the role. So that's really helpful. Okay, we're gonna finish up now, Susie, even though I think I could talk to you forever about this. No, it's really helpful, and I think it just shows that actually it is a complex process, and it is something that you can't do lightly. You have to think about it. You have to be intentional about. But where can we find you, Susie, if we get to a point where we do need to negotiate something? Where can we get some more help from you?
Yeah, absolutely. Drop into my DMs on Instagram. I'm always around to have a chat. Obviously, we've got the 5 Hour Coaching channel, so please do come and ask. Every Wednesday I'm in there answering negotiation questions. And so it's a fantastic channel that Amy set up that is just brilliant. And so, yeah, come in there, ask any questions you like. And if it's not a Wednesday, don't worry. I'm sure someone will make sure to put me on to you to be able to answer the questions. But come find me on Instagram. If it's for a business, then come follow me on LinkedIn, not a problem, Susie Powis. But yeah, I will always be responding and happy to help.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Susie. I know I might come to you next time I need some help with that as well.
Your husband should have come to me.
Yeah, he definitely should about the flexible working. I'll tell him. I'll say next time that is okay to ask for that too. So I'll let him know next time. Thank you so much, Susie. It's been a pleasure. We'll speak to you soon and we'll see you in the channel as well. Thanks for that. Okay, everybody. Take care. Good luck. Bye.